What we are going to discuss today is the law of enough. And to help us discuss the law of enough, we'll use what I call the should model. Now, the law of enough is really helpful for those of us who tend to become overcome and overwhelmed by our to-do lists, our projects, and the events that we get ourselves into. So the law of enough starts in its application anytime we think about something that we want to do or we need to do, and we come in at that project or that scenario, maybe even that event, with a could, should, and ought to attitude, meaning that while we are thinking about doing the thing we're about to do, our mind's eye gets fixated and on how big and how grand, how embellished and expansive the idea can become. In fact, it's almost a grandiose notion. It's so embellished that all we see are how many bells and whistles we can add to whatever we're thinking of, and it becomes so huge that it is bigger than life. It becomes very heavy, and it becomes almost impossible because it's so perfect and so big. So it's almost impossible for one person to complete. Now that's coming in at the should, could, and ought to level. So if we downtrain ourselves, or we actually downshift, we start to realize, hey, maybe we could be a little more realistic with our ideas. Now when we get to realistic, we try to take into consideration time, we try to take into consideration energy, we take into consideration our resources. And what we're trying to do is match up all those things that we have some sort of power over and see if we can become a little more realistic. We try not to make it so big, not so outrageous, and we try to downgrade the expectations. However, this also can become a little too expansive and maybe not even what's necessary. It too can feel a little more stressful than it needs to be. And often what we find is when a person lives, when you and I live in this space somewhere between what we think is realistic and what we think could, should, and ought to be done, well, that's when we start to have feelings of anxiety. Sometimes we get a little depressed because we cannot actually function at the level that we expected ourselves. Sometimes we have too much tension, and the outcome is we have anxiety, we have pressure. This is not a fun thing to be feeling. So there's one more place that we can go in terms of trying to find the essentials of how much of this idea or this project we really need to deliver on. By using the law of enough, we downplay everything to a place of more peaceful and more harmonious energy. And we go to what's bare bones necessary. We think in terms of what do we need to do simply and honestly to complete this project. Again, it's bare bones, it's just what's essential, it's just enough, it's just right, it's simple and complete. Now when we live in this space between realistic and between what's necessary, all of a sudden the heavens open and we start to get a great big smile on our face because we're living in a place where there's peace of mind, there's harmony in our actions and our ideas, and this is a place where pacing actually matches our reality. So sometimes the key to living the law of enough is to get down to the bare bone essentials of only those things that are necessary. We don't should, could, and ought on ourselves. That's a good thing to remember. We don't get into the should model by coming in too big, too grandiose. Even when we downtrain to realistic, we realize time, energy, and resources may not even allow us to play in the realistic. We go all the way down to what's necessary. We have peace of mind, harmony. We get those things done that are essential. And we actually do not do the stinky thing which is we do not should, on ourself.